Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for coming back for another session of Build Your Craft and Career 2022. I have an incredible young lady here, Stacey Dillion, who is coming to us all the way from Belfast, Ireland originally, but she's now in New York City. So Stacey, thanks so much for joining us today to talk a little bit about your career.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you work for Bond Mechanical Corporation, construction, which is I know what mechanical construction is because I'm a carpenter, but can you explain just for the average young lady who maybe doesn't even know what that means, mechanical construction, can you kind of give us like a tangible real world example of what that means?
Yeah, mechanical construction is anything to do really with processes mechanically. So anything to do with pipes, equipment, water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, power plants. A lot of the things that we use and we need every day, we don't realize comes from mechanical construction, from a small scale like the plumbing in your house and in the water heaters and things like that, right up to, sewage treatment and things like that. So it's definitely interesting.
So a lot of things that run cities, a lot of things that run companies, hotels, like office buildings, right? All that mechanical infrastructure that you don't really see, that's maybe in the pipes, behind the scenes, right? Underneath the building. That's what your company builds, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so give us a little bit about, I know that you used to be an architect, but tell us a little bit of your story of how you came from, Northern Ireland to get to the United States, to be working in New York City at a very high level. You're the vice president of estimating, which is a very high level job for a woman to have in that type of construction company. Can you give us a little bit of background of how that happened?
Yeah, I think I've always been really interested in how things are built and how things work. And architecture seemed, as a teenager, a good fit for me going into, university. And then when I got there, there was parts of it that I loved, and especially when I got work experience in the field, and there was parts that, was a little more challenging for me. I think architecture has more of an artsy flair to it and a very subjective view of what's good and what's not. And
what's pretty, what's good.
Yeah. And I felt like at college, university, I did a lot better in the more, mathematics, scientific classes and aspects of building buildings or processes. And then when it came to the more artsy, it was a little more subjective and harder for me to follow. I came to intern in America, and I got this internship. And when I got here, unfortunately, I was unable to start at the architect company I was meant to start with. And the program I came out with, fortunately, matched me up with a mechanical construction company. And initially, they felt that I had experience in drafting, and that they had needed help with CAD and 3D model and things like that. And, I didn't fully understand mechanical anything, to be honest. But that they just really needed help, and it was a summer, and so they accepted me, and I started working for a mechanical construction company.
And so, but what happened? I mean, that must have been talk about a very steep learning curve, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you knew AutoCAD, but still, you were still kind of probably learning that too. And AutoCAD's a pretty comprehensive program. So what, did you fall in love with it right away? Or was it sort of like, wow, this is too hard? Or what was it like in the beginning?
It was very scary. And, I'm all of a sudden I'm 20 and I'm on the other side of the world, and I'm working in a field that I'm not familiar with. And it was on a construction project at the Croton water treatment plant. So it was in a massive scale, multi-millions of dollar contracts, and it definitely was the deep end. And at first it was very terrifying, but after a few weeks I started to really enjoy, working with different clients, different subs, vendors, submittal processes. And I really just fell in love with mechanical has more of a start and end to it, a process, like a logic, every single pipe system, has a purpose, and it starts somewhere and it ends somewhere, and it needs pumps, and
so it starts to make sense once you kind of see one
Yeah,
thing applied, you're like, oh, and then if you do it again, you're like, oh, it's like that thing. Oh, I
yeah,
get it. It's just bigger, smaller. Okay.
yeah. And it definitely just changed my mind on, you know what, this felt more natural for me and more comfortable. And with
Yeah.
architecture, something always seemed missing. And when I started working in mechanical, it just was a great fit for me, and it made much more sense.
Yeah. And so you did the internship. So that was obviously very successful for you. When did they offer you the position? Like if it was a 2 month thing, how did it just roll over into a full-time position?
At the end of the internship, they offered me a full-time position.
Hmm.
But I had 1 year left of university, and I wanted to, you know, very much go back and
Yeah.
finish up. So I went back to Belfast. I finished my degree, and then I came back out the following year. I did a second internship and then started full time in September.
Nice.
So it was definitely
And so you went from Belfast to New York City, right? That must have been a big shocker.
yes, yes.
What was your, if you can even remember back, because now you've been there for quite some time, but what was probably the biggest thing that surprised you? Do you remember?
I remember everything just being so big and so like everything was magnified.
Yeah.
People, food, you name it. It was just incredible to me, the size of everything. And I think, you know, originally, initially, I thought I'd finish this project out. That was a few years of a project. And I
Yeah.
figured, you know what, I'm going to get this great experience, and then I'm going to go back home and, you know, be able to get a job with all this experience. And I really did fall in love kind of with New York and America once I was here. But
Yeah.
it was definitely a shock, you know. And I think on a professional level, I realized that all of the construction projects that I was able to work on here was just not needed in my country. And I'm from
Yeah.
a very small country, and
Right.
the just the magnitude and the engineering and the construction just here compared to there, with, you know, turned out not
Yeah.
to be so exciting for me.
It'd be like you setting up plumbing in someone's house. Like it would
Yeah,
feel
yeah, I
very
definitely,
small scale. Yeah.
yes,
So I mean, it's been quite a few years now. And so after you did that first, say, year or two or three, and you started to get really good at it, what was the like sort of what was the thing that you did to upgrade your career to get onto a trajectory where you eventually became vice president, right? Of estimating. I mean, that's a pretty big swing right there. So, and you look still quite young, right? You're not like you're 70. So you've done that quite aggressively, right? That's happened quite quickly. So what are some of the tips, or like what was sort of that, you know, a lot of women I see get stuck in construction. Either they start and then they never move up, or they leave the field because they feel it's too difficult or they don't like the culture. So like I always like highlighting like the people that are successful. Like what do you think you did that helped you continue to move up? Can you think about that or remember?
Yeah, I don't think it's, you know, it is much more difficult being a woman in this industry, especially when you're almost always the only woman in the room or department or area or
Yeah.
whatever it is. I always felt like I needed to be better. You
Mhm.
know, I needed to work harder and be better and pay attention to things. And I felt like if I could prove my use in my work, then that would like outshine me being a woman or whatever. So I've always pushed to be like the best at whatever the task is.
Mhm.
Um, Originally, you know, you're young and you're a woman in the field. It's a lot more difficult, than sometimes, you know, situations happen and you don't say anything, and then after you kind of like, you know, you're annoyed at yourself in the situation for maybe not speaking up. So I think very early on, I realized that, you know, I needed to speak up when I needed to,
Yeah.
and not just let things happen.
Mm.
And that's always been, you know, very positive for me to like say, you know what you said was not okay, or the way
Ah,
you did this was not okay. And
yeah.
90% of the time the people are just like, oh, I didn't realize, you know. And
Right.
I think being vocal when it mattered, as well as trying to be, and I feel being the best I could be at each
Yeah.
task and taking it very seriously. And for me it was like a special, and it still is, you know, sometimes I think, you know, I pinch myself and go, how did I end up here a little bit? Because I'm, you know, I go home a little bit and I see kind of my life before, it's
Yeah.
definitely drives me to want to be better and want to be the best at what I do. And I
Yeah.
think that, we can all, every time you do something, you can always do it better. You can always learn from it. And that's just always the way I've been.
Yeah. Did you ever like sort of ask for opportunities? Did you ever, or did people sort of just notice you and kind of continued progressing you up the ladder? Or were you fairly ambitious about sort of looking for the next position and positioning yourself for that or asking for that?
I've never been one to ask for position. I've never been one to push to have a title. I think that's why I've ended up where I am. I've never went somewhere just for a fancy title. I've always wanted more responsibility. I've always had that in me where I
Yeah.
have a project and it's fairly small, and I see someone else taking on a much larger project, and I go, that I want to take on that responsibility.
Yeah, I
So
guess
it's,
that's what I mean. Like you asked for more responsibility basically, and then that
yeah,
let you.
I think definitely responsibility. For me, I want to do something, I want to do it well, I want to learn how to do it, and I want to be the best at it. It's like a
Yeah.
competitive nature. It sounds strange, but like I've always wanted to, like, I'm kind of a perfectionist, I think, too, and a little stubborn. So I hate
Yeah,
getting things wrong.
it bothers
So I
you.
definitely, yeah, and being in a male dominated field just makes you a little bit more aware of, I can't make mistakes as much as like the person next to me, because it'll be,
Yeah,
maybe
judged
not
more,
good the same
judged
way.
more harshly. Yeah.
Definitely,
What's
yeah.
your astrological sign? Do you know?
Sagittarius.
Sagittarius. Okay, I was saying Sagittarius or Taurus. That does not surprise me. Very hardworking, very loyal, very particular. Very. I mean, so you're in a good job fit because that is a highly detailed job with a lot of money at stake, a lot of things at stake, right? A lot of moving pieces, and you are naturally you enjoy doing that, making things
Yeah.
correct and perfect, and yeah, that's funny.
And
Um,
there's definitely a lot of responsibility and a lot of stress that comes
yeah,
with managing big responsibility and people.
yeah.
Once you get into the management of people, it becomes a lot more difficult to
Mhm.
oversee, because it's moving parts, and sometimes
Yeah,
everyone's running in different directions. So, but it's
yeah. I was gonna
definitely
ask you about
rewarding.
that a little bit. Like, so going from being a young woman from a very small town, right, in a smaller country, like how have you learned to manage your stress and just manage taking care of yourself in a very stressful job? Like, what have you learned that might be helpful to pass on to some young woman who's on a job site right now and feels like, wow, I don't think I can handle all this? Or,
Yeah.
like, what have you learned how to do?
There's definitely been times where I felt the stress level's too much or the responsibilities too much. And I always think, how can I ever take on more? And then a year passes, and
Right.
you go up the ladder a little bit, and then you look back and you think how silly or easy that was compared to what you're dealing with now. I think you
Right.
definitely have to put things. I'm really into organization and making lists. It sounds silly, but I always make to-do lists and I prioritize.
Yeah.
And as much as I don't like to push things a couple of days, the more things on your plate, the more you have to prioritize.
Yeah.
And then I think once you're managing people, the more you have to delegate. And it can be hard letting go a lot, especially for
Yeah.
me, but you cannot do it all yourself. So you get into more of a delegation role and a overseeing and checking versus doing yourself,
Yeah.
and those sort of processes. But yeah, definitely can be difficult dealing with stress. I feel like for me too, I now have two children.
Okay.
So that's a curveball, I guess, in
Yeah.
plans
Yeah.
where I want to keep them happy and healthy and spending a
Right.
lot of time with me. At the same time, I want to continue to develop my career and make sure that everything's covered in my job. And
Yeah.
so it's
And you're doing it, which I think is one of the things I highlight in this summit all the time, is that so many people think that if you're a woman, you can't be in the trades, you can't be in construction. And yet I'm unusual that I don't have any biological children. I have two stepchildren, but most of the women I've met are mothers. They have children and they are just doing incredible things, right? So it is just not, don't let that be the thing that's stopping you. Like you guys are all proof that you're doing it, you know. So I think it's very admirable.
Yeah, I definitely think once you have children, you know, every minute of your day counts. I think it allows you to hone in on what you're spending time on, you really don't
Right.
need to, and what you're stressing about, you really don't need to, and what, you know, you get more from your day.
Yeah. More
Definitely
efficient.
get more for your day because you know, I have to do this
Yeah.
this evening, you know, I'm the caregiver or whatever.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's switch gears a tiny bit and talk just a little bit about like, what is your job, right? So vice president of estimating and purchasing, what, to describe that to the layperson, what does that mean? You live in New York City. What are you doing on a daily basis? Like, what does that actually mean?
So I am in charge of an estimating department. So estimators, pretty much we get a project first. You know, an owner or a client has a project, they either put it out to bid, or they call us in to take a look at a facility or whatever the job is, and we go in and we estimate the project, pretty much what it costs
Right.
to do that job, and we evaluate, you know, labor, material, equipment, subcontractors, and then other direct job costs like, you know, project managers, a trailer, whatever we need to do that job. And then we, for public or you know, other bidders too, we bid the job and we work through kind of packages and marketing and things
Yeah.
like that. And then on the other side of my job is purchasing. So I'm in charge of also purchasing, which means once we are awarded a job, we get to buy everything, which is a lot
Shopping.
more fun. It's like shopping, but on a really
Massive shopping with millions of dollars.
yeah, on a really stressful technical scale with lots of contract
Yeah.
words and fun stuff like that. But it's definitely a high stressful
Mhm.
like job for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you a part of the sales process, like meeting with the client? Are you a part of sort of any of that part of it as well?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely part of the sales and the client. A
Okay.
lot of the times, you know, it'll be between two or three companies, and we'll have to
Right.
go in and make a presentation on, you know, why are we the better fit for the
Mhm.
job. And so yes, that's a big part of the
Yeah.
role also.
So do you like that part of it?
It can be yes and no. It can
Yeah.
be, you know, stressful getting up in front of a room full of people and presenting their project to them. You know,
Right.
it can be definitely stressful, but it also can be really rewarding. And
Yeah.
it is nice to be able to meet people and meet clients
Yeah.
and you
Go and
know,
have cocktails or go to a restaurant and kind of,
fulfill
yeah.
definitely fulfill those needs, you know, that they have.
Yeah.
Definitely,
Do you
definitely part
find
of the
that
role.
being a woman is you have a little bit of a competitive advantage? Like, do you ever feel like maybe it's a little bit surprising that you're there and then they're kind of really impressed by, wow, just how much you actually know about the project?
I think 50-50. I think within the first 5 or 10 minutes of entering a room with a client, especially in person where you feel it more, you
Yeah.
can tell whether you have a shot at that or not.
Or if it's
And
helped. Yeah.
whether you need to like lead the presentation or let someone else take care of it. So I think
Right.
there can be, you know, clients or situation that prefer to hear from the
Right.
experienced male in the room that's done it for 40 years. And then there's other clients that are open to just hearing the presentation, and it just depends on the client, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just knowing when, you know, what's a good fit for that client and
Mhm.
what
What
they
makes
need
you feel
to,
comfortable? Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. So my last question is just, can you imagine your life now if you hadn't, like, what do you think you'd be doing in Ireland if you didn't have this job? Because obviously it's a very big, important job and it comes with financial success and stability, and you can pretty much probably go anywhere and get work, right? In a lot of places now, because you have lots of experience. So that must give you like enormous sense of pride in yourself that you've created a whole career here. I mean, can you think about what it might be like if this hadn't happened and you hadn't entered the trades?
Ah, Not really. I don't know. I feel like I just like hit the ground running and haven't really looked back.
Yeah.
I think that that's part of the drive, like pushing me forward, is like not the fear of going back, but knowing what was before. So I
Yeah.
think that like I know that it's in my, I guess I feel that certain aspects of it is temporary.
This is a
Which
very
sounds,
classic. This is a very classic
I,
woman in a construction trades.
I
Wow, I'm
know,
like incredibly good at it, but I still don't think I'm really that good at it, right? Like, how much
yeah,
more can I learn? Like, yeah, this is pretty classic that women are always trying to get better and better and better instead of
yeah,
just enjoying the ride, right? Just enjoy the
yeah.
job. And yeah, you're obviously very good at what you do.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, so what do you guys do? What does the family do for fun in New York City? I've been there many times. I love it myself. So what do you personally love about it? To
We
do something
live,
fun.
when I was younger and first here, the city life was very appealing. I think it is to most people and tourists, and
Yeah.
the shows and the lights, and but as I've gotten older and kids and everything like that, we live outside the city.
Okay.
So it's definitely a more suburban area
Yeah.
than New York City. So I feel like we get the both best of both worlds, because my
Right.
husband and I get to go see shows and when
Yeah.
we want to, and then but our family home life is, we live on a lake. So
And yeah.
yeah, we live on a lake and there's
Oh,
trees and
nice.
trails and forests. So it's
Lovely.
definitely a nice contrast and
Yeah.
de-stressor from kind of the high rise, high life in New York
Right.
City.
So you get a lot of variety in your career and in your personal life, it sounds like, between the
Yes.
contract. Like, yeah, that's
Very
that's
much needed.
awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing your time with us. We know you're very busy and just sort of showing us yet another job that a woman could have that I would have never even thought of myself, like estimating and purchasing. And that sounds like a really interesting job, like a lot of things happening that are always, you're always learning. It sounds like a really fascinating job. That's like no day is ever the same, is what it sounds like to
Yeah,
me.
no day is ever the same. That is for
Yeah.
sure. It's definitely,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing a little slice of life from New York City. And
thank
we
you.
really appreciate just you being on the show and joining us for the summit.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.